We are very excited today to have Randall Davey, a longtime friend. We went to college together. He was a student. He was at the same place, Eastern Nazarene College in Quincy, Massachusetts. And then we have touched base in seminary and graduate school and various relationships and contacts. He's been a supporter of our Servant Forge project, and he's had an interesting journey. And I think those of you who are interested in the legacy project and the kind of legacies that we inherit and the kind of legacies that we want to create, I think you're going to enjoy this podcast. So, welcome, Randall, to the podcast.
Thanks, Jim. I noticed you left out our shared experience two times, sailing the Greek Isles and then our trip in the Virgin Island, but that doesn't need any more attention.
Yeah, that's probably for both of our benefits. That's right. Though I do remember one late night anchor watch in a bay in Greece with a long
Absolutely.
extended conversation that was really a rich experience. And so,
Yes.
and I won't explain in detail why we were doing an anchor watch. So, so Randall, where were you born?
Cambridge, Ohio,
Cambridge.
intersection of I-70 and 77. At that time, the largest clover leaf in the world.
That is interesting. That is also one of the spots that they call the methamphetamine intersection.
Well, that too.
That too. So, when I was doing a lot of drug work,
Yes.
that interstate intersection was a place where drug traffickers worked. So, your family's from Ohio originally?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, mother and father both grew up. They grew up in the same little village of Lore City, Ohio, a little mining community
Mhm.
about 9 miles east of Cambridge. In my growing up years, we would go out to my grandparents every Sunday afternoon, and that seemed like a big trip. That
Yeah.
once a week we did the 9 mile trip, but it just seemed like a big deal back then. My parents, though, lived out the majority of their life there in Cambridge. When my mother was 90, I moved her to Seattle, where I was living at the time, and she lived there for the remaining 5 years of her life.
Wow. That's something. You have siblings?
I do. I have an
Yeah.
older brother, Jim, who's 83,
Mhm.
vibrant, robust. My sister, Becky, is 78, retired uh, physician's assistant living in Ladson, South Carolina, and Bonnie and I have been here in Mesa, Arizona for the last 10 years
Yeah. How did you find Arizona?
on GPS.
GPS.
Yeah, I had no thought of living here where it's 75 degrees today in early February. Um, Living in Seattle, a client of mine by the name of Gary Edmonds was the CEO of a nonprofit, and he was elected to be president of Food for the Hungry, the largest faith-based organization in Arizona at that time, raising about $160 million a year to alleviate extreme poverty in the world. Gary would come back to Seattle once a quarter. We had breakfast, and I said to him at that time, I want to remain open to God's creative future, but I don't trust myself to figure out what that is. I was 65 at the time. And a few months later, he asked me if I'd come down, and I thought to consult with Food for the Hungry and some of their major donors. So I flew down, and about an hour into the conversation, I realized this is an interview, and they concluded by making an offer. And I just said, I have my practice in Seattle. And I loved Gary, just loved him. And he said, why don't you run your practice from Phoenix and give oversight to our advancement team, about 9 people? Well, Gary, who I thought was exceptionally bright and just a thoroughly good man, in this instance, didn't make his best call because to invite me to come down and run my practice and do that, I was as naive as he because I wanted to think it was a good idea. So I did. And when I arrived, they asked me for a 10-year commitment, which
Oh,
now would be up this year. 65, 10-year commitment. I said, I'll give you a one. I could be dead in 10 years. Well, as it turns out, I'm still here. But not long after that, Gary was diagnosed with colon cancer, died in 2018. And I decided to step away at that time. I had never thought about living in Arizona. It wasn't on my bucket list. When I came down and looked at it in 2015, I said, basically dirt and rocks. I don't know what people rave about. But in 2018, I said to Bonnie, do you want to go back to Seattle? And she said, I think the sun works for me. And so I'll probably go 6 under right here.
so I failed to mention that Randall is a wealth educator and a financial planner with Guide Advisors. And uh, and how long have you been doing that kind of work?
23 years.
23 years. Wow. Because I've known you as an educator, a pastor, a spiritual leader, a variety of vocations and positions, uh, and as a wealth educator. Um, it's interesting. Big transition from being a pastor. You were for how many years?
28.
28 years. From moving from that profession to this profession. Um, Big transition from a
Not
learning
really.
standpoint? Not really. Yeah.
Well, obviously, to sit for the certifications and tests, yes.
Hmm.
But I would say my life today doesn't look dramatically different than it did for the first 28.
Hmm.
The reason I've chose wealth education and I function as a financial coach is that I found my industry to be systemically evil. Now, by that, I simply mean uh, big organizations, financial institutions do not exist for Jim Copple's well-being. They exist to make money.
Hmm.
And I watched some of the dark sides of that and experienced it. And I discovered this, that people who are struggling with tremendous financial pressure, and I don't care what their income is, but people of that magnitude, very few people who are living with financial stress are singing "It Is Well With My Soul."
Yeah.
I watched money divide families, divide partnerships, and so I was intrigued. And my conclusion was there is a missing element. Financial services are typically sold.
Mm.
And I thought it's not appropriate for a cardiologist to sell open heart surgeries. Open heart surgery is a solution to a possible problem, and it's an alternative. So I was intrigued to say, I want to help people understand what they have, their in place products, plans, strategies, and to say, do they really do what you think they do? Are they correlated? And so I have that a unique niche in that way. And so it feels to me the majority of my conversations, I would say, are still pastoral. A
Hmm.
lot of them have spiritual overtones. One person called and said, you were referred to me by Dr. So and so, and he says you do marital counseling. Well, when you're talking about money, you really
Yeah.
touch all fabric. And so I would say, apart from standing and talking on Sunday morning, I now sit and listen, but my day-to-day work has never changed from being a pastoral.
That's important, particularly in the field that you're currently working with. I would imagine people really value and appreciate it. So, speaking of values, um, growing up, and what shaped or influenced you most in terms of the legacy that you've inherited from your family, from friends, coaches, teachers? Who are the people in your life that helped shape who you are?
I would start with my grandfather. My
Mhm.
grandfather frame, uh, my absolute rugged, earthy pioneer farmer who lived in poverty all his life and didn't know it, was generous, lived on a farm on which he was born, bought it from his dad for $2,000. And years later, in the late 80s, when he died, uh, he divided his estate this way. He gave my mother $2,000, he gave my aunt $2,000, and he gave my uncle the farm and the oil rights that went with it. But I have lots of memories of walking through a field with him, riding on a fender of the tractor, just listening to him talk. And he would often say, if I had my life to live over again, I would do this. Uh, Very well read, I think eighth grade education, but he was an orator, quite entertaining. One of my great fun memories is toward the end of his life. He didn't know it, nor did I, but I was home for college and I went out and visited with my grandparents. And we spent the afternoon, my grandpa and I, telling different pranks we had played on people. And he was a coal miner. And one day he was coming up out of the mine at the end of the shift. And somebody said, Casey, tell us a lie. He said, I can't. There's been a collapse. I'm going for help. And the guys go running down. There was no collapse. And so we just kind of enjoyed that. But he really did say some very poignant things, and I think uneducated and extremely wise.
Mm-hmm.
And so I give him a lot of credence. Maybe on the darker side, I would say I was raised in fear and
Mm-hmm.
some in shame. Um, to say it was a shame-based culture would not be an overstatement. And that was, you need to act this way, look this way, be this way, or else there's a negative eternal consequence. And so I lived with a lot of fear. Um, there was a pastor in my childhood that was significant. His name was Jim Fox. Jim, interestingly, had gone to Eastern Nazarene, where I went later. I was one of the few teens in the church. And as I tried to navigate my teen years with my mother, who, as an adult child of an alcoholic, was very controlling and shame-based, though loving in her own way, I would frequently go over to the parsonage on Sunday afternoon, sit on the porch, and talk. It wasn't until years later that I realized how much, as a pastor, you value taking a nap on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah,
But
right.
he poured into me. And I don't know that I would have gone to college had it not been for him.
Hmm.
When I was a sophomore in high school, he drove me from Ohio to Boston to visit Eastern Nazarene, and that kind of set a trajectory because in Cambridge that time, a lot of people in our socioeconomic level didn't go to college. Real men worked. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, my hero grandfather, who was a coal miner farmer, greeted me when I came home at the end of the first semester break in college, walked out through a field, and he looked over and he said, "What kind of tree is that?" I said, "I don't know." And he goes, "College." He was not impressed. But I would certainly identify Jim Fox.
Mm-hmm.
I also would say three other people figured significantly.
Mm-hmm.
My father was probably one of the kindest men
Mm.
I ever knew.
Yeah.
Gentle, a man of integrity, principle, conviction, and unfortunately did not live in harmony with my mother, though they stayed married all their life. But my mother, out of her hurt and out of the carryover from her family system, lived life as an angry person. But they both gave me a gift. My dad was very trusting. My mother was very skeptical. And I feel like I got a bit from both of them that I receive as gifts.
Mm.
The third person that probably figured as significantly as anybody was my older brother.
Mm.
He's 8 years older than me. And as a result, I don't have a lot of memories. I have a snippet, a slide in my mind's eye of Christmas morning. And I remember my brother getting a gift of aftershave lotion. I thought, what a bummer. What kind of gift is that? But he started speaking into my life. I remember when I was age 14, he said, "Get out of Cambridge." He said, "When you drive into Cambridge, there's a big negative sign." And he said, "You need to leave." And probably long before I knew who the author was, he basically said, "You can do whatever you set your mind to do." He was very entrepreneurial and started a number of businesses, and one of them failed. And I said, how do you feel about that?" He said, "I just learned one thing that doesn't work," and went on to be eminently successful. But I always found that he stretched me. I felt like I could never catch up to him. And I hold him in high esteem and revere him greatly to this day. He's a very vibrant 83, planning another trip to Europe in the fall, and intellectually alive and very influential.
Mhm. That's great. You still in regular contact with him?
Oh, yes, a
Yeah.
couple times a week.
Oh, that's great. That is
Yeah,
super.
yeah.
So we're talking to Randall Davey with a wealth educator and financial advisor with Guide Advisors and a longtime friend. I've known him since our college days. Rem Sequentially, you went to Eastern Nazarene College, but you then transferred to Mount Vernon. Is that right?
I started at Mount Vernon,
Okay.
68 to 70, transferred to ENC in the fall of 70, and graduated in 72.
Okay.
Went to the Nazarene Seminary, 72 to 75.
Okay. So you're a year behind me.
That's correct.
Yeah.
You were my grader. So in my first year at seminary, I took a very
Mm.
challenging course in church history from Paul Bassett, one of the true scholars at NTS.
Yeah.
Jim was the grader, and I took a test, and I had never taken a test like it. Um, and I got back on my paper a double A. And I just couldn't believe it because I found the test very difficult. I was very uncertain. And I went to Jim and said, "I've never received a double A." He said, "That's a 44. You flunked." So, so that lives in my mind as one of my traumas. I have to say, interesting story. Years later, I would serve for 11 years as Paul Bassett's pastor at the Overland Park Church.
Yeah, that's right. I remember my first year as his grader. I won't mention the student's name, but it became somewhat prominent in the Church of the Nazarene that we were both part of. And I gave him a low score on a paper, and he said, "Well, I graduated from Mid America Nazarene College, and I've never had anything below a B." And I said, "Well, you can always go to Dr. Bassett." And he can do another reading of it. So he did. And Dr. Bassett looked at him and he said, "I've had this problem with Jim. He grades far too easy." He had my back. So,
Yeah, that's great. That's Paul.
yeah. So, in terms of your education, um, what what did it do to contribute to your life and the values that you've grown to live out and express?
That's an interesting question.
If anything.
I was going to say I'm not sure about the correlation. I would say that one of the greatest contributions that educators made to me is to help me know how little I know.
Mhm.
And the further I went, and especially graduate work after seminary, was the awareness that I know so very little. I know a lot of what I don't know, and then I don't know a whole lot of what I don't know.
Mhm.
Um, and so I used to say that one thing that undergraduate school did for me was to take the Archie Bunker out of me.
Mhm.
I found myself operating with less certitude, saying things like "it appear," "it may be," "it's possible that," as opposed to making declarations as though I knew the mind of God,
Mhm.
which I don't.
Yeah.
But I think it's fair to say that though my education started formally in 1968, I probably have done more learning since I graduated from graduate school.
Hmm.
I'm uh, I'm a prolific reader. I try to read between 70 and 80 books a year because I want to know. I'm just curious. I know that I don't know. I'm reading James Cone's The Cross and the Lynching Tree this
Yeah.
morning. I just finished Gregory Boyle's Barking to the Choir.
Yes.
As I'm sure you know him and his work with gangs. I read because I want to know. And in that regard, though I'm 75, I feel like I'm a freshman in the school of life. But the things that have changed me the most have been some of the reading I've even done in the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And the takeaway from that is I want to be a contributor as long as I draw breath.
Yeah.
I have no thought of kicking back at a resort and playing bingo. No
Mm-hmm.
judgment on those who do, but I feel a responsibility. I feel a debt to
Mm-hmm.
pay back. And so I want to breathe in where I can.
Mm-hmm. So that's an interesting point, and I'm curious because I wrestle with this as well. At our age, I'm 76, you're 75. Uh, I reflect back on my journey. In fact, I just celebrated the 60th anniversary of the from the time I preached my first sermon at the age
I
of
saw
15.
that.
Yeah, and I look back and in both in education and life experiences. How has your legacy prepared you for where you are today?
I think is often the case, it may be a reaction to.
Hmm.
So I think about the fact that those who've gone before me can live in my head rent free.
Hmm.
My sister and I talk every day, nearly every day, since her husband died 2 years ago, February 4. A lot of our conversation will rally around something our mother said, and not always a positive thing.
Yeah.
And so my sister called her girls, both adults, and said to them, I hope I never say to you the kinds of things my mother said to me, but if I do, I'm asking your forgiveness in advance, something my mother never did. And so uh, it's interesting watching my brother, who feels his primary calling now is to breathe reinforcement, encouragement into the lives of his grandkids. My granddaughter Ellie it's our privilege to be raising her, and he takes deep interest in her and sends words of encouragement. And he said, "This is now former vice president in a publicly traded company to now saying my mission is to invest in grandkids."
Mm.
And that shaped me as well. And I see one of my primary roles is speaking into the lives of my grandkids without giving unsolicited advice.
Yeah. Well, Randy, you've also uh, chosen a path. I mean, you work for Food for the Hungry. You've been a donor and contributor to Serve and Forge, and probably numerous other organizations and causes and missions. Um, why do you continue to do that at this stage in your career?
Well, a couple things. Number one, I don't think much about stage or age.
Hmm.
It's just what's my responsibility. And one of the things that has evolved for me over the last few years is my understanding of prayer.
Hmm.
Early in my life, it was pray for Jim, pray for the doctors who operate on Jim. I don't pray that anymore. I read somebody, and my memory is not like yours. I know you can remember the author of the book and the page it was on, but I read somebody that said, don't pray for the poor, but rather be positioned when you have opportunity to give to the poor, to do something for the poor.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I have a responsibility that goes beyond what's right under my nose. And I realize I can't respond to every need, but out of 10 needs, there's something that will just prick my heart. When the Trump administration withdrew funds, USAID funds, and you posted about a need in Kenya that was right now, I felt like I had to respond to that.
Mhm.
And one of the things I hope to pass on to my kids, my grandkids, is just a spirit of generosity. There's an old proverb that says, um, it's possible to give away and become richer and hang on too tightly and lose it all. And that has nothing to do with prosperity gospel, but it's just
Mhm.
saying, look, I hang on to whatever I have pretty loosely. It's just kind of flowing through. I have an opportunity to steward. And if I have a chance to lift somebody's load, then I feel it's my responsibility to do that. One of the ways I've tried to train, especially Ellie, um, when we're in a public place, we have a little game. I'll say, Ellie, do you see somebody in the room you want me to talk to? And she'll point out some stranger because I'm trying to encourage her to be curious. When I
Mhm.
drove her to school yesterday morning, I said, sweetie, be curious, be kind. And often at the end of the day, I said, were you curious today? What did you learn? Were you kind to somebody? And she'll say, well, I opened a door. Does that count? I said, yeah, that counts.
Yeah.
But I'm curious. I feel responsibility beyond myself. And the more that I read about experiences in history here in the Americas, to say, what responsibility do I have as a result of what I've learned? And I want to show up as generous.
Mhm. That's a good word. And this next question, you may have already answered it in part, but uh, I've often struck by Stephen Covey's book, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, and the second habit is living with the end in mind.
Sure.
And what do you want people to say about you? What is the legacy you want people to remember about Randall Davey?
Willing to admit failure,
Mhm.
take responsibility for it, and move forward in faith. I do live with the end in mind. Interesting question. A week ago, Sunday night, my wife and I were driving across the valley, about a 45-minute drive. And I asked her, an introvert, can I have access to your mind? And she said, yes. I said, what's a fear with which you live, but you don't articulate? Without
Mhm.
hesitation, she said, I fear dying before Ellie graduates high school. And I said, interesting. That's the same fear I have. Now, we can't change that we're 75 and 76, but what control do we have? He said, well, we can control what we eat. I said, come up with a better plan. So, so I told Ellie the next day, I said, sweetie, I'm really going to try to eat more healthily. And she said, let's see how long that lasts. But the reality is, I am aware. The minute you mentioned somebody dying at 90, I think, ooh, that's 15 years from now. Or I
Yeah.
see somebody on TV like Mitch McConnell struggling. I said, ooh, that's only 5 or 6 years older than me. So I'm aware at this time every day is a gift. So I write a letter every year to my family to say, these are the things that I hope you value, that I value. I want to make sure you know. And I encourage them to be generous, to be kind, to forgive before somebody asks you. And I encourage them to cultivate spirituality and not to confuse that with religiosity. And so I write a letter, say, if you're reading this letter, I'm dead, uh, and keep that on file.
Anything else you would want them to say about you?
Tried hard, solid work ethic, um, didn't handle doing nothing well.
You got to always be engaged.
Well, it's interesting because I recognize time is fleeting. My biggest struggles are the weekend. Um, Last weekend, Ellie was away for the weekend. Bonnie was sick, and so I was in the family room alone. I read for a couple hours, and I thought, is this what it would be like to be retired? And I don't like how that feels.
Hmm.
And so I'm trying to explore that, if what that says to me about me, because Bonnie will often say it's okay to not have anything on the agenda. It's just that I have this ravenous appetite to know, to not miss out on. I remember our friend Paul Bassett would reserve Sunday afternoons for writing letters to people. And so I spend a lot of energy connecting with people. I still have almost every other week, at least, conversation with college roommates, people I went to school with 55 years ago. Um, I'm encouraged by the fact that when I saw the other day that one of the things that contributes to a robust, long life, more important than diet and exercise, is engagement, social engagement. So by that token, I should live to be as old as my grandparents. So
Yeah. So I saw a movie a number of years ago. Um, Takes place in Ireland, and it the woman in the movie is being pursued by a suitor, and her values are sort of misplaced on material things. And he asked her this question: um, if your house were on fire, what's the one thing you would grab? And it can't be a person, and it can't be your computer because it's got everything on it. But what's one thing in your life? For me, just to give an illustration, I have a black box that my father gave me uh, out of the Second World War that over time I have put things in there. My admission letter, for example, to Harvard for my part of my doctoral work, which said something to me in terms of my background. Nobody would ever assume that I could ever go to Harvard. Um, or, um, you know, a grade card. Uh, I have a lock of hair from a high school girlfriend in that black box. It's just symbols of where I've been and what I've done. And I would grab that for sure. If I only had the chance to grab one thing, and it couldn't be a person or it couldn't be my computer where I store things. What's one thing you would grab?
probably a clean pair of underwear. Because my mother always said you got to be prepared if you end up going to the hospital. Let's assume I got smoke inhalation. You want to have clean underwear. So, honestly, nothing.
Nothing?
Because I don't think so much about where I've been as to where I'm going.
Oh, good point. Mhm.
We are going through a phase. I read a book, and I'll have to modify the title, but it's basically the essence is nobody wants your stuff. And the writer said, do you want your kids to grieve you or loathe you? And so I've started decluttering.
Uh,
And I've just started with my stuff in the garage, my stuff in my closet. Now, Bonnie is still in acquisition mode, so I think we're a net zero. But as I've gone through things and say, yeah, there's a memory behind this knife that I got when I was in junior high in the Smoky Mountains, but it has no value. And
mm,
I want to make available to my grandson who likes tools. Anything here you want, it's yours. I just said to a young man right before we got on the call who offices next door, if you see any books on my shelf that you want, take them. They're yours.
wow.
There's just, it's not that I'm not sentimental, but I store what's valuable to me in my head. until the day that it won't be there any longer.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah, I find every book I give away, I buy two.
Yes.
I haven't mastered that. In fact, we have traveled to 47 countries in every state in the Union, and we have so much stuff,
Yep.
and nobody wants it.
Yep. Yep.
And in
Yep.
fact, my two daughters who live in Maryland came to Utah, and I said, anything, my study, you can have anything you want. And Jessica went to my bookshelf and picked up a piece of pottery she made when she was in second grade
Yeah.
and says, I want this.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're kidding.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've taken up watercolors as
Yeah.
and really enjoying it. And I painted a compass rose and I took a picture of it and sent it to my daughters, to which my one daughter said, "You're an impressionist, Dad. It always looks better from farther away." And my other daughter said, "I want that picture because it's a compass rose, and because I have a tattoo on my arm that is a compass rose." She says, "I want that picture," and so giving things away. But I've sort of come to that point. Um, I, you know, my house would be a burden to my kids if I
Yeah.
died tomorrow.
Yep. Yep.
And so figuring out ways to give it away. Well, Randall, it's been great talking with you. You have had an amazing influence on people, and our journeys have not always been easy. They've been difficult and challenging, but uh, what I admire about you is you've never given up. That statement you just said about you don't live so much for about the past, but about the future. And at our age, that's an important statement, and it's a gift. It's a gift to me and to I'm sure our listeners. We've been talking to Randall Davey, a wealth educator and financial advisor with Guide Advisors, and uh, he's always given good counsel on stewardship and how we prepare for the future. Um, and Thank you for being with us, Randall.
Thank you, Jim. Good to be with you.
Yeah.
I'd rather be doing this on the back of a boat in Greece, but this will work.
This will work. I agree. Maybe that's still in our future.
Let's hope.
Yeah. To find out more information about this conversation and other Legacy podcast episodes, go to servantforge.org. Please subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app and consider leaving us a review. The podcast was produced by Matt Erickson, music by David Hyde. Please look for a new episode on our podcast coming out soon. Remember, you have inherited a great legacy. You have an opportunity to create a great legacy. Engage your past to build your future.